Where we left off on section 1, we were talking about the United States finally entering World War II. The war starts in 1939, as we looked at, with Adolf Hitler, the appeasement policy, more territorial acquisitions, but it's going to be 2 years until the United States gets involved. And during those 2 years, we know about the Neutrality Acts, we know about the Lend-Lease Act, right? The United States was playing a role, right? We just weren't an active military participant. With the attack at Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the United States now becomes an active participant. So this section, we're going to be looking at some of the changes that are going on at home, right? So you see the name of the section is the Homefront. We've talked about this during World War I. Front, the word front, when you're talking about a war, it's just another way of looking at a place where the war is happening. So you have the battle front, right, and then the home front, which would be going on back in the country, right, dealing more with the civilian and social changes. Right, so the first thing we're going to look at, and there's going to be an awful lot of propaganda posters in here, so I would like you to, at the beginning of every time I switch to a new slide, I want you to hit the pause button so that you can just take a second and skim through these, because like I do with every other chapter, you may find some of these showing up on your test later on. But we're looking at how to support the war effort. Now, the United States government is going to need everybody, or as many people as possible, to be supportive of the war effort, because it's going to be more than just soldiers, planes, and tanks, right, in order to defeat the Axis powers. So the U.S. government is going to go to great lengths to try and make people either enlist if they are eligible to serve in the military, or make some other kind of sacrifices, right, that will help the war effort. Right, now this graph is important because it kind of helps us make the bridge from the Great Depression, which was the chapter we just finished, right, to the beginning of World War II. So it's showing you unemployment, right? You're going to see that World War II effectively ends the Great Depression in the United States. So with the government setting up the War Production Board to try and control the economy, organize it, right? The government starts making, or the economy, excuse me, starts making a shift from making consumer goods like TVs and radios and refrigerators to now we're going to be making airplanes, tanks, and there's an incredible demand for that. So factories start to expand, hiring more workers. So at the height of the Great Depression, right, you're looking at 1933, right, the percent of unemployment in the United States was about 25%. And then the start of World War I, 1939, I highlighted it here on the graph for you. You can see that unemployment's about 17%. But then once we get closer and closer to war, you see the down arrow, right? Unemployment is going down, which means more and more people are going back to work. Right. We're also going to, and this was one of the biggies. I told you there were two big essential learnings you had to get out of this section, right? And one was the idea of rationing. Right, because with such an increased demand on the part of the military, right, the American people need to realize that a lot of the things that they're normally used to having are now going to be limited. All right, so the government implements a rationing system. Right, rationing simply means having small amounts, and I'm sure Mrs. Love will forgive me for this, but if you start talking about rational numbers in math, I know you've been covering that recently, especially now you're reviewing for your state test, right? If you think rational numbers, you don't want to do a lot of math, maybe, right? So the system of rationing is you don't really need a lot of it, or trying to limit as much as possible. So maybe you want to limit as much math as you can, right? Government also tries to raise money through war bonds, same thing as World War I. Now you'll see all of the different posters all around this. So once again, I want to draw your attention to this one down here, right, the pilot in the air that says he can't fix guns in the air, build them right to keep him flying, right? That's the whole idea of, even if you're not fighting, you are still contributing to the war. And the other one on the side here is the victory gardens, right? If you can grow your own food, right, that's more food that can be sent to the troops. And then just like with World War I, we're going to look at it from a social perspective. African Americans and women, which will be on the next slide, right? African Americans play a role in two particular areas. One is in working in the factories, and the other is by serving in the military. So they just came out with a movie recently, and then it's also in the Smithsonian, Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian, was the Tuskegee Airmen, right? And that was the first all African American, the first famous African American unit that fought in World War II, consisting of the pilots. And then here is your other biggie, and I put it in red bold for you, right, was how did women play a role in the home front? Now, we had talked last week about Rosie the Riveter, right, she became the symbol, just like Uncle Sam, she became the symbol for the home front, right, at least from the female perspective, right, women taking the jobs, working in the factories that the men left behind, right, so women are going to make up 25% of the total workforce during World War II. Right, but women, even though they weren't able to serve in the military, on the front lines, they still were able to participate through the Women's Army Corps and the Navy Nurse Corps. All right, now this is a rather dark side in American history, and you're going to start to see some parallels between, though not as severe with what Adolf Hitler was doing in Germany, but we're going to look at internment camps. All right. Now, with Pearl Harbor, after the attack at Pearl Harbor, a lot of people are going to be angry, and they're going to be suspicious of anybody of Japanese descent. Now, we can draw parallels to this with after 9/11, right? When word leaked out that it was Islamic terrorists that were responsible for the Twin Towers, people started to become suspicious of anybody who was of the Muslim faith. So, right, back in 1942. Roosevelt's going to sign Executive Order 9066. Now, I made a typo here. I just had to take a second to change it. Right, we're looking at February 1942, not 1932. So please go ahead and change that on your notes. And what this order did was it removed all people of Japanese descent from the West Coast, and it moved them into these internment camps further inland. And the whole idea was the government was worried about espionage or Japanese spies or sabotage on behalf of the Japanese spies living in the United States. All right, this map is showing you just some of the relocation centers that were set up, and you can see, right, people who lived on the Pacific coast here, obviously Japan would be out here, right? They wanted to move them away from the coast so that a lot of the military bases and camps were protected, right? The Supreme Court actually got involved in this and upheld FDR's executive order, saying that it was a military necessity and it was a national emergency. So even though those people were American citizens and they had rights, right, the government felt that their rights were not as important, right, as the safety and well-being of the rest of the country.